Hello, Ariaki. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for asking, and welcome to Nrityavana Talk series. And I'm glad to have you with us today and to discuss and speak more about dance.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, so now I spoke to you earlier and I got to learn that you're pursuing your Alankar right now in Kathak, which is kind of a post graduation. And is it it's like a post graduation or a PhD in classical dances?
The Alankar, you're asking about the Alankar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a master's degree, so it's post like a bachelor's. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so now that you're pursuing your Alankar, but let us just retrace our steps and go back to a time. Can you remember your earliest memory of dance?
Hmm. Uh, yeah, I think, I grew up dancing. I always had that affinity, but when I was young, like 4 or 5, I used to dance in like the local Holi and the Diwali celebrations, and the moms used to choreograph a dance and put it together, and that was about it. But I think some parents went up to my parents and were like, oh, she's dancing really well. And my parents were like, okay, like she's 4. I mean, there's not much, she can do. So then my parents just decided that they would put me in the dance class just so that I wouldn't be, like an awkward kid at some like Indian party and I don't know how to move my body. So they thought they'd put me in dance and they didn't really think much of it. They didn't think what it would come out to be today. But yeah, I remember always loving to dance, like loving every aspect of the costume, the dancing, the practicing, makeup, everything. So yeah.
That's nice. Thank you for sharing that with us. And so after your parents introduced you to like the formal training, so did you start with Archana Joglekar, who's your guru? So did you start training in Kathak directly?
Yeah, I trained in Kathak. I also trained from Madhavi Devasthani. She's a very brilliant choreographer. She lives in the New Jersey tri-state area. And so actually through her, she was also learning Kathak from my guru, Pandita Archana Joglekar. And so that's how I came to know about Archana Dai. And so from Madhavi, I call her Madhavi Maushi. So that means like aunt or Madhavi Maushi. So I was learning a variety of styles, like folk styles, Lavani, Garba, and then just generic like Bollywood dancing. And then also learning Kathak from Thai. Yeah.
So for Kathak, was there like an age limit? Like you can't start before a certain like if you are below 5 or something, you can't start. Is there like an age limit for an entrance?
Mhm. When I was learning, I think the age was 7, but nowadays the parents are very keen and there's a lot of competition, that if you don't lower the age limit, then you might lose some students. So now the age is about 5 years old, but below that is a little too young. So I think 5 is the age.
And so, like Indian classical dances are very much intertwined with music, and we can see that prominently in Kathak. So, along with your Kathak training, how is the music element introduced to young kids who are learning dance, and how are you introduced to it? And did you also have another music complement class which would like fill in the gaps for you?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think this question has like 2 answers. One is me personally, and then kind of generally as a teacher, how the class is structured. So me personally, I come from a musical family. So like the word that we use in Hindi is like mahol or mood, I had that growing up. So for me, it wasn't so hard to immerse myself in the classical music because my dad plays tabla. He is not professionally, but he does teach and he plays. He's very passionate about that. And so I did grow up going to music class, not because that was something that was required by my Kathak class, but just because I came from that background and my parents wanted me to learn that, and they thought I could be a good singer. But other than that, I think from the young age, the students are introduced typically first to tabla as an instrument, not necessarily how to play it, but how to dance with the tabla, because Kathak has, unlike some of the other classical style Indian dance styles, it kind of, a lot of the material comes from the percussion repertoire, from the tabla repertoire. And so because of that, we keep the taal and we do all kinds of compositions on there. And they're not necessarily, perfectly choreographed items, but they're just todas or tukras, that what we call them, like small rhythmic compositions, which we do. So for that, it's important that students understand, rhythm, they understand the time-bound cycle of which our taals go in classical music. So such instruments that keep that time are like harmonium, tabla, sarangi, sitar. So in that way, the students are introduced to these instruments through the lehra, which is or nagma we call it, which is the melody that keeps the cycle of the taal. So that's the very initial thing. And then, so and then I think students don't necessarily learn like melodic items until a little bit later on, more expressive pieces. So yeah, that's pretty much.
So essentially, for someone who's looking to like learn Kathak, for them, like the technique of playing the instruments is not something that's needed, but having a knowledge would make a lot of difference of
Yes, definitely, yeah. And sometimes that comes through learning. When you learn, it's easier for you to understand that, but not always the case.
Right. And so how is like the training, like is there a marker, like if you've finished like 3 years of like Kathak training, so now you have like learned these basics? Now I'm just mapping it to Bharatanatyam, which is my training. So I'm mapping it to like if you've completed like 3 years, now you know the adabus. Now if you're completing like 5 years, now you know the shabdam. So things like that. Is there kind of a marker in Kathak training like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I found that unlike the South Indian sort of well-organized structure, even in Carnatic vocal music, there's like a defined structure. I find that Kathak and other North Indian instruments, there is a trajectory that you follow. It's a generally understood that you first start out with your tatkar and your footwork, then you get introduced to chakras or spins, and then you move on to very simple todas. Then there's like that generic progression, but there's not necessarily a worldwide or like a universal kind of syllabus. It's more, okay, you've been learning for 3 years, so you probably know some tatkar, and you probably know how to do chakra, and you can probably do toda. But it really varies. There's a lot of heterogeneity between teachers and the different gharanas, and whether you're following an exam board or not. So all those things play in that. So.
And when does the pieces of Abhinaya get introduced in this training?
Yeah, so for us, so we have like the Parichay level, which is the kind of nursery level, in which they learn a shlok, Sahanavavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu. So that's kind of the first introduction. They're very simple expressions, but some of them are complicated, like Vidvisha, like these kinds of, when they're small, 5 years old, they don't have that much fine motor skills. So those kinds of things are difficult. Then at the Prarambhik level, they do like a puja dance. So basically simple incorporation of mudras, Griva Bhed, Shiro Bhed into a dance. And then at the Pravishika Pratham level, which is like the first grade, they start to learn more, like a song with a melody, that kind of thing. So it has like a progression in that sense. Yeah. So that would be about, I would say, 2.5 years, depending on the student, 2 years into the training.